Project 8B. This is the second part of a three-part project using Illustrator, Photoshop, and InDesign. Before we can put our bottle into Photoshop, there's something we have to do, and this will cover a few things about file types and artboards in Illustrator. I had you change an artboard size for the ZYX logo in Project 7. Now we're going to add artboards because Illustrator files can have multiple artboards. This is obviously the main artboard, Artboard 1. I have an artboard palette, and you can see there it lists Artboard 1. To add artboards, I can hit this plus sign here, and that would add another artboard just like the one I've got. But I want specific artboards. So I think it's easier to do document setup, Command Option P to go back to your document setup or find it in the file pull down, edit artboards. So there's my artboard number 1, and I have a little symbol on my cursor for drawing artboards. If I start on here, I'm going to grab this artboard and move it. I don't want to do that. I want to start outside the artboard so I don't touch that one. And just drag another one that only covers my bottle. And if that's a little too wide, I can squeeze this in some. I just need it big enough for my bottle. Notice that I set up my label and my logo in such a way that they will not appear on this artboard. There are situations where you may want to have artboards that overlap different parts of art and include them on different artboards, but in this particular case I want that to be a separate artboard, and I'm going to start over on the other side and drag one here because I want a separate artboard for the Massimo's logo, and I'll come in sort of close on that one. I don't need it to have an excessively large artboard. I don't need one for the label. The label, bottle, and the logo will stay on artboard number 1, but we're going to have a separate artboard. It says 2 and 3 or 3 and 4, but let me just change the name of this so that it's not confusing and they agree. Number that one that I put in by pushing the plus sign down here, and although I deleted it, it still uses that number. So I'll just reset those to 1, 2, and 3. And once I'm done, if I grab any tool, it should get me out of the artboard setup. Okay, now what do we do with those artboards? Well, an Illustrator file can have multiple artboards, but an EPS file cannot. Even though they're similar architecture, an EPS file is an AI file that is put into a container called an encapsulated PostScript file, EPS, and that changes how it works in some ways because PostScript does not allow transparency. So we're going to use a function in Illustrator to save these as separate artboards as EPS files. And the separate artboard for the Massimo's EPS, that's fine. We can use that later in our ad layout in part 8C as an EPS file. But the bottle, we want to save it as an EPS and then reopen it and save it again as an AI file. Now you could do this by copying and pasting this stuff into new documents, but that doesn't give you any experience with working with artboards, and it also doesn't show you file conversions. So I'm going to Command-Shift-S, save as. You'll notice I've called this video demo artboards because that's what I set up this file for. Yours, of course, will be your last name, DL8A, and it will have subcomponents here. Save it as an Illustrator file. And now I have the option of using artboards. I don't need artboard number 1, I just need artboards number 2 and 3, so I'll say range 2, 3. Or if I had 16 artboards here and I wanted numbers 5, 7, and 9, I could say 5, 7, 9, and then I would just save those artboards. I'm going to save range 2 and 3, 2 to 3, because I don't need artboard 1. Artboard 1 can stay the way it is. I just want to save out of artboard 1 artboards 2 and 3, which are the bottle and the logo, as separate EPS files. I don't need to change anything here. Just leave everything the way it is and say OK. If I look on my artboard, let me Command O open from my desktop. I have an artboard 2 and an artboard 3. I'm going to reopen these in Illustrator. Artboard 3, I'm going to change the name, Command-Shift-S, save as, or you could do this by just changing the name on the desktop. Since I do so many of these, I'm going to call this one 2020C because that's the year and semester that I've created this. And that can stay in EPS. I'll save that. I'm going to save this as DL8A Massimo bottle. And again, I'm doing 2020C because that's this semester. You can save it as your last name, DL8A bottle. And this time I'm going to save it as an Illustrator file. So it's back to an Illustrator file. Now, why do we do this? Well, we're going to put this into Photoshop. I'm going to just leave this right here for a minute and open my Photoshop. And as you can see, I have selected a salad image. You will need to select a salad from the resource folder provided or find your own salad image, but the requirement is the perspective of the scene and the perspective of the bottle have to fit together, and you have to have something that at, say, 9 inches wide is at least 200 pixels per inch, and that's unmodified. If you take something off the web that's 72 pixels per inch and it's 6 inches wide, and then you rescale it up to 200 pixels per inch at 9 inches wide, you're going to have blobby, blurry mess of pixels. You're not going to have a crisp, clean, sharp image. We want a crisp, clean, sharp image, so make sure that you start with something that is between 200 and 300 pixels per inch at 9 inches wide. We want to make this into a vertical magazine ad, which will be 8.5 by 11. So we have to change the size of this to get it to fit. And the way we do that is not by scaling anything here. And let me just show you the Command Option I. My size here is 9 inches wide, 6.76 inches tall at 200 pixels per inch. I'm not going to do anything to that here. But I will change the canvas size, Image, Canvas Size, or Command Option C or Alt Control C on the PC. And that gives you this. But before I do that, it would really be handy if first I made this background a layer. Background on my layers palette, double click, change that to, maybe I'll call it base, my base salad. So that's now a layer, and that means that I have a transparent background behind it if I turned it off. That also means that if I Command Option C or Alt Control C on the Windows operating system, this is a reference point and this is relative to the center. If I say relative to the bottom, I want to change the height to maybe 12 inches. 9 by 12, good image size that will fit on 8.5 by 11 and allow for bleeds. You could scale it down a little when it's on the InDesign document, but for now, around 9 by 12 would be good. I'll say OK, and you can see that because I had made it into a layer and there's nothing behind the layer, I've got this transparent background, and I could now add another layer, put it behind there. I could take my eyedropper, maybe select this onion color, hold the Alt key to get the background, maybe select the egg, add a gradient background, if I could find my gradient tool, which should be here somewhere. And on the background I could put some sort of gradient background. And I would probably have to add a mask in here to feather this so it would blend with the background. I already did one of these. You can see that I actually have two backgrounds in here, so I've got a choice of backgrounds. I did this in another file. You won't see a non-destructive edit on this particular thing, but what I did was use the clone tool and copied some onion to extend these to fill it out so it comes out as even objects instead of a straight cutoff. Then I use a layer mask to kind of feather that into whatever other background I put in there, whether it's this one or that one. I also made a copy of the salad and used it as a foreground object so that if I'm down here, and actually you'll find that there's a bunch of bottles in here already because I demoed with this one a lot. But if I'm down here and add something in now, it will be between everything below and this foreground salad. So I'm going to add that, and what I'll do is on my desktop, I'm going to open a file folder that shows my desktop and find that bottle. I want to show you what happens first with the EPS version. So here's my artboard number 2. I'm going to drop this in here. There it is. It's between the foreground and the background. It's too big for this, but it'd be about, say this big. But you'll notice that the transparency is gone. Encapsulated PostScript, EPS, encapsulated PostScript. PostScript language does not allow for transparency. Everything we do as a transparency effect in one of the Adobe programs, Illustrator, Photoshop, InDesign, when we rip that, when we raster image process that to send it to an output device, transparency is flattened, converted into what you actually see. This is what you actually see on a white background in the Illustrator file, and so it gets converted to that and it has no transparency. I can hit the return key to embed that, accept that placement. It's not transparent. I'm going to go back to my folder, find my new Massimo's bottle, and drag that in. Page, image, let's say image, and craft a bounding box. That'd be fine. I'll say OK. This is my AI file, and notice it now has transparency. hold the shift key to constrain so I don't distort my bottle. I'm going to put that where this one is, and there you can see that you can see through my bottle. And I'm going to throw out the other one because that's obviously not what I want. Now, a couple of things about these bottles. You may find that it doesn't look bottle enough to you. It doesn't look realistic, doesn't look glassy enough or plasticky enough. What I do when I want to make it look better in Photoshop, I make a duplicate bottle. So I'll say duplicate layer. And with the one in back, if you wanted these to move together, probably a good idea to select them both, right click and link layers, and then you might want to put them in a group. Command G, group. The one in the background, if I change the blending mode to maybe hard light, maybe not, and I can click here and use at least on the PC, this never worked that well on a Mac operating system, but I can use the down arrow on the keyboard to scroll through these. And I think multiply, no, color burn, maybe, linear burn, no, darker, no, lighter, no, screen, color dodge, linear dodge, lighten, overlay, soft light, hard light, vivid light. I think vivid light. So that's what vivid light looks like. This is what the bottle looks like without vivid light. And there it is with a vivid light bottle behind it. It kind of helps the effect of the transparency of the glass or plastic of the bottle. Now, other things you need. Well, you need to put shadows in. This one appears to be lit from over here somewhere based on the hotspot on the onion, and this side of the salad is lit better. And there's clearly a shadow under here. So this shadow would actually be down behind there somewhere. But one thing you probably immediately notice is that my highlight on the bottle is on the wrong side. If this is the salad I'm going to put this in, I've got to change my bottle. So what I do is double click on the Smart Object thumbnail and it will reopen in Illustrator. So what did I want to do? Well, I got to take this bottle and go into 3D Revolve and put my fill light on the other side and move my spotlight over here. And if I want to paint with light a little more, I could add another one of these and put it down here. And if that gets too intense, actually I might go more to the side here. If that gets too intense, then I can reduce the light intensity. I'll say OK, and that matches the light that was already on my bottle cap, which didn't match my bottle. And I should do the same for my dressing. And let's put this one over here and this one over there, and maybe add another one over here, and reduce the light intensity. When I've completed that, Command S save, Command W close, remove my Illustrator, and if you watch closely, it updates in Photoshop. The highlight's now on this side. If I Command Z, this is how it was before. Command Shift Z, this is how it is now. So don't be willing to settle for mismatched lighting situations, because you can open this and adjust it in Illustrator anytime. Maybe that's too bright. I'll just double click on this again, my bottle, 3D Revolve, and in my lighting options, I think my lighting intensity is too high. This one right there, cut that one to 50%. I'll leave this one at 100 because the edge light doesn't show much. It's fairly subtle in a lot of cases. Okay. Again, Command S save, Command W close that file, and back in Photoshop that should update. And does it look different? Let's try Command Z. Very intense light on the left side. Command Shift Z. Less intense light on the left side. And I think I like it that way. And that changes both of them because they're both on the same smart object. So that's the basic task of DL8B is to separate your Illustrator file into 3 artboards: the original artboard, a separate artboard for the bottle, and a separate artboard for the logo. And the reason I want you to do it with artboards rather than just copying and pasting it into new documents is so that you understand how to use artboards. And that does give you an EPS, which does not have transparency, but you can reopen that in Illustrator and save it again as an AI file to make sure that you have transparency when you bring it into Photoshop. The other thing I have here is I have multiple backgrounds, but also multiple bottles. If I close that one, there's a bottle there. There's this bottle here. This one has a shadow. This is the one you may recall that I put a lime in, just in case I need one with a lime. There's another bottle over there. So there are bottles in different positions. It's when the lighting is wrong. If I was going to use that, I would have to change the lighting as I demonstrated on this one. Oh, there's the top of that onion. In case you were wondering about the top of that onion, it's right there. I was wondering about it. I'd misplaced it. And the 2 different backgrounds in case I need to do something different with the background. If you don't like a perspective, if you think that, say, this bottle is at the wrong angle, so in addition to opening an Illustrator to change the lighting, if I think that bottle needs to be tilted forward more, or I need to increase the angle of perspective to get it to foreshorten more, I could do that. Now this is kind of exaggerated, and I don't think that would be correct at all for that scene, but I can do that. And I'd have to do that for the dressing also. As you can see behind the bottle, it still has the previous perspective on it. Well, I don't want to do that because I know that's wrong for that image. So Command Z, I'll undo that. Command W, I'll close that without saving. I have a few other examples I can show you in the next segment.